Hello and welcome to another online exciting talk brought to you by the Zionist Federation of Great Britain. I am James Arlo, holding the fort for tonight's event. But before I introduce our guest, I wanted to remind you of what's coming up over the coming weeks. And they are all free to join via Zoom. The Abraham Accords have brought about a the Middle East with the recent peace and trade treaties, and they're signed, of course, as you know, between Israel and the UAE and Bahrain and Sudan. And we are told there are more to come. And to hear many insights into what is taking place between Israel and the Emirates in particular, we are joined by the Emirates entrepreneur, Omar Al-Busadi, on Sunday, the 6th of December. That starts at 6 p.m. GMT, 8 p.m., of course, in Israel. That's in 2 weeks. Now, the week after that, which is Sunday, the 13th of December, that's the fourth night of Hanukkah, the Zionist Federation will be hosting a Hanukkah celebration with the World Zionist Organization. More information on that will be available this week, so please look out for the Zionist Federation published details. And then on Wednesday, the 16th of December at 8 p.m. GMT, the Zionist Federation will be hearing all about Jewish life in the Emirates, synagogues, minyanim, kosher food, learning, Jewish schools, and much more from the rabbi of the UAE, who is the official chief rabbi of the United Arab Emirates. But turning back tonight, firstly, let me welcome you all. If I can remind our guests this evening and our viewers this evening, would you please make sure that you are on mute, which is very important for this to work smoothly. And also, if you have your camera on, most people don't like their cameras on, but if you have your camera on, please, it would help if you turn it off. And we'd be very, very grateful. So that's, please make sure that you're muted, and please make sure that your camera is off. You do have the opportunity to ask questions. I do encourage it. The Zionist Federation encourages questions. And if you do have questions, then please just send them through the chat box, which is down below. And I'll pick those up as we move on. Turning back to tonight, as I said, in 1993, Israel finally recognized the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization led by Yasser Arafat. The Israelis, led by Yitzhak Rabin, brought Arafat and his fighting colleagues from Tunis, then Tunisia, initially to the Gaza Strip after Israel pulled out of Gaza and Jericho under Oslo I, and then a further 5 cities were given to the Palestinian Authority, which is under the umbrella group of the PLO. Arafat eventually settled in Ramallah, and there was a great concern that he and his close team was saying one thing to the international world in English, but sometimes saying something completely different to his people in Arabic. Now, at this time, there was a massive campaign of suicide bombings across Israel, mostly claimed by Hamas and Islamic Jihad. But there was another group that was claiming successful suicide bombings. And in 2002, Fatah, which of course was Arafat's faction, was responsible for more successful suicide bombings in Israel than the 2 other groups, believe it or not. I was living close to the city center of Jerusalem at the time and remember it very, very well. Itamar Marcus found a way to monitor what Palestinian media was saying by listening to their broadcast and viewing their school books. He is the founder of the Palestinian Media Watch, studying Palestinian society, and he joins me now. Thank you for joining the Zionist Federation this evening. Itamar, what was the trigger that said, I have to find a way to monitor what they are saying in Arabic, and when did you launch?
Well, we launched in 1996. This was 3 years after the signing of the Oslo Accords. And we felt that it was critical to find out what was happening in the internal Palestinian world. It wasn't enough to know what they were telling us. We wanted to know what they were telling their own people, what they were teaching their children, and the activities that were going on at that time. And for that reason, we started Palestinian Media Watch, and I'll tell you more about that in just a moment.
So the format for these talks is for the guests to speak for about 30 or 40 minutes, and then we will take some questions, which once again, I do encourage, send those questions to the chat box below. As and when, we will get to them in 30 or 40 minutes time from now. Again, please make sure that you're on mute, except of course for Itamar. Itamar, don't go on mute. And myself, I'll also stay off mute just in case. And if you are sending questions, please make them brief and relevant to the conversation at hand. Itamar, over to you.
Thank you so much. And I'll put on my, my PowerPoint screen as well. So as I was saying, it was 1996. We wanted to know what the Palestinians were telling their own people in their own language and the activities. So to this end, we started looking at everything we could about the Palestinian Authority from all the open sources. We read their newspapers and read their sports pages. We studied their school books. We looked at cultural events. We even studied crossword puzzles in the official Palestinian newspapers. And what we discovered very quickly was that there were two different worlds. There was the English language world for foreign consumption. There was the Arabic language world that really mattered. And what I'm going to give you a little picture of today, a window to, is that Arabic language world, with a focus on Palestinian children and why are children so important. We believe, we're convinced, and now I think it's been confirmed by everything we've been publicizing all these years, what the Palestinian Authority really means is what they're telling their children. It doesn't matter what they tell the President of the United States or the Prime Minister of England. It matters what they tell their children. That's what really is their ideology. And in addition, that will determine what the next generation will think about Israel, about Jews, and about possible peace with Israel. So that's what we're going to do today. Now, I'm just going to open with some examples from sports. And I'm starting with sports because you're probably assuming that we're wasting our time reading the sports pages of the newspaper. What could we possibly be finding there? And I'll show you that we're finding some of the most important things on the sports pages because it's so innocent and it's so popular. The Palestinian Authority...
Itamar, sorry to interrupt you. We have a few guests saying that they're struggling to hear. Are you able to speak up a bit or adjust the volume on your mic?
Okay, is this any better now? Let me just try to move the microphone a little bit closer in front of me. Directly in front of me. Do you hear me better now? Is this better?
Yes. Yes, we can.
Thank you. Sorry to have interrupted. Thanks.
That is fine. Sorry, it was. Okay, so what's been going on in Palestinian sports since the Palestinian terror war of 2001, 2001, which James mentioned when the suicide bombings were going on, the Palestinian Authority started naming sporting events after terrorists. And in fact, the worst terrorists who killed the largest number of people. In 2002, there was a sporting event named after the bomber who blew up at the Passover Seder, killing 31 Israelis. So this is what, and this was in the Ministry of Education. Now, what we have in front of us, you see there was a Dalal Mughrabi Sports Festival last year. Who was Dalal Mughrabi? Now look, first of all, you see all the girls participating in the sports festival are wearing a sweatshirt with a picture of Dalal Mughrabi. Well, I'll show you who she is. She hijacked this bus in 1978. She killed, together with other terrorists, all these 12 children, in addition to 25 adults. It was the worst terror attack in Israel's history. And the Palestinian Authority felt it was proper to name that sporting event after her. In addition, there have been dozens of other sporting events named after Dalal Mughrabi. So as well as hundreds of sporting events named after other terrorists. The Palestinian Authority uses sports to role model for their youth and to tell them, these are your heroes, these should be your role models, this is who we want you to emulate and to be like as you're growing up. Now, they do the same thing through their school books and their schools, and I'll just give you a few examples. This is a chapter in a Palestinian school book for 5th graders, which means 11-year-olds, and they're teaching them about heroes. And they teach that heroes have an important position in every nation. We're proud of them, sing their praise, learn their history, etc. Every one of us wishes to be like them. And then it continues and lists 10 heroes. Who among us has forgotten Dalal Mughrabi? So you have 11-year-old children who are being taught in a school book that they are supposed to be, everyone wishes to be like Dalal Mughrabi. Well, she was a murderer of 37 people, 12 children. She also was killed herself. She was a so-called martyr. She died herself in that terror attack. This is what children are being taught in the Palestinian schools. Then it talks about them. They are the best of the best. They threw their lives in their hands and threw them at the dangers. And this chapter ends with this incredible sentence: bravo to the heroes and scorn to the cowards. In other words, you 11-year-old, if you are afraid to die killing Israelis, then you're a coward, and scorn to you. That is the message in the Palestinian Authority school. Just show you, but they don't even stop with the school books. There are 31 schools named after Palestinian terrorists, 3 named after Nazi collaborators, and there are 5 schools named after Dalal Mughrabi herself, who hijacked this bus. Now, what's the impact on children? The children understand when a school is named after a terrorist that the Ministry of Education is giving them a message. It's been confirmed numerous times on Palestinian television. I won't play this video to you, but I'll just read to you. They interviewed young girls, high school girls, in a Dalal Mughrabi school. And listen to what some of the girls said. One student said, Dalal Mughrabi is a great leader. This fighter may have died. Her soul ascended to heaven, but still our mothers give birth to thousands like Dalal. And a second student said, my life's ambition is to reach the level of the martyr fighter, Dalal Mughrabi. So you've got over 30 schools named for terrorists, and you've got all the students going through those school systems just by the name of the school, realizing that they are supposed to copy those terrorists themselves. Now, just last month, a Palestinian university opened up a new arch, a new entrance to the university. This is Palestinian Polytechnic University. And whose picture did they put here? The martyr Salah Khalaf. Who was he? He was the head of the Black September and the one who planned the Munich Olympic massacre of Israeli athletes at the Olympics. So this is being honored. And look at this final example here. This is a girls' high school in Bethlehem. In front of the school, what you have is this plaque etched in stone. And on the stone, it's to commemorate the martyrs of the Al-Aqsa Intifada, it says, and it specifies one name, the martyr Ayat al-Akhras. Who is Ayat al-Akhras? She's a 17-year-old girl suicide bomber, the youngest Palestinian female suicide bomber. So this girls' high school, every time the girls walk into school, they are being told, look who your hero is, look who your role model is, a 17-year-old girl who is your age. And what did she do? She blew herself up in Jerusalem, murdering 2 Israelis. So this is the message from the role modeling in the PA. So the first message we're getting to the Palestinian Authority is, and it's throughout the country, it's throughout the society, your role models are murderers, martyrs, and even child martyrs. This is the first message. Let's go on. Hate messages to adults are also transmitted to Palestinian children. I'll show you how this is done. One of the worst messages the Palestinian Authority gives to its adults and its children is that Jews are evil, innately problematic, innately connected to Satan. And I want to show this to you in a video that was on Palestinian television, a speech by the most important religious figure in the PA. It's Mahmoud al-Abbas. He is Mahmoud Abbas's advisor on Islam, and he was also appointed by Abbas to be head of the Sharia courts. Listen to what he said on Palestinian television. What is the conflict about? Is it about territory? No, it's about Islam against the Jews. Listen to his words.
هذا الصراع المحتدم ها هنا في فلسطين بيننا وبين هذا الاحتلال المجرم صورة أخرى من صور الصراع التاريخي بين الحق والباطل، بين الخير والشر. على مدى التاريخ كان هناك صراع بين الخير والشر. الخير يمثله الأنبياء وأتباع الأنبياء، والشر يمثله الأبالسة وأتباع الأبالسة، الشياطين وأتباع الشياطين. ونحن ها هنا لسنا بدعا من الأمر. هو صراع بين حقيقتين، حقيقة الخير وحقيقة الشر، بين مشروعين، مشروع الرحمن ومشروع الشيطان.
Okay, this is one of the most awful messages and one of the most important things for us to recognize. The Palestinian Authority is telling its people that the conflict is not about territory. He says this is a historic conflict between good and evil, between the supporters of devil and Satan against Islam. And therefore, and he's talking about the Jews, And he says, therefore, the Palestinians are Allah's project, but Israel is Satan's project. Israel represents Satan in the world. According to some Islamic traditions, Satan brings all the evil to the world, but they need human beings to commit the evil for them. And here he's saying the Jews are those evil. Therefore, Israel is rotten to the core by its essence because we represent Satan. Now, this is the message to adults. Look at one of the ways this has been transmitted to children on Palestinian television. This program was broadcast twice during the Ramadan on official PA-TV stations.
لقد هزمنا يا لعين أمام جندي من جنود الله. إنه الرعب هو من هزم اليهود وأخرجهم من ديارهم في خزي وعار. لقد بنيت خطتي على نار الحقد والكراهية التي تملأ قلوب اليهود نحو محمد وأتباعه.
Okay, so you heard Satan there. He's built his plan to destroy Muhammad on the hatred that the Jews have for Muhammad. And then the next scene, you see the Jews sitting here planning how they're going to attack Muhammad. And look who's above them. It's Satan who's hovering above them, giving them the ideas. So the message through this cartoon to very young children, and we're talking here about even preschoolers who are watching this, is that first of all, the Jews are the sworn enemy of Muhammad, and we know how dangerous that is in today's world to say someone's an enemy of Muhammad. And who's giving the Jews their ideas? No one other than Satan himself. This is the message Palestinians are teaching their kids, and we've heard numerous times where children have recited poems talking about Jews as Satan, as allies of Satan. So this is the message coming to Palestinian children. Now, another aspect of the demonization, you've heard this expression in the Quran, that there are a few places in the Quran that Allah, Muhammad are angry at the Jews and they're turned into apes and pigs. I want to show you how this is expressed in Palestinian society.
صهيونة يا شر البرية يا قرودا همجية يا خنازيرا شقية.
لأن حربنا مع أبناء القردة والخنازير هي حرب دينية عقائدية. أنت يا فتى.
في المدينة المقدسة في هذه الهبة استطعنا أن نمنع 80% من المستوطنين أبناء القردة والخنازير.
نستطيع أعوان القردة والخنازير وقطعان المستوطنين.
من جعل منهم القردة والخنازير وعبد الطاغوت.
الظلم مكتوب عليكم والشقاء يا قرودا همجية يا خنازيرا شقية.
السر البرية يا قرود همزية. أعداء الله أبناء الخنازير تصب النساء في ميادين. برافو زقفي.
Okay, bravo, bravo. What I wanted to show you is that the message that Jews are apes and pigs, it's coming from political leaders, religious leaders, educators, and then of course it's coming to children as well. So we're seeing again the same idea. First you're hearing the message as an ideology, and then we're seeing the transmission to Palestinian children. So the second message to Palestinian children are Jews are innately subhuman, allied with Satan. Jews are people who are really a major problem in the world, not just for Palestinians, but for all humanity because we're allied with Satan. Okay, and then the messages continue. Again, what I'm showing you here, and this is so important, the messages are so often directed at Jews and Jews' position in the world because that makes it impossible to make peace with us. If the Palestinians were telling their people the problem was territory, then there was a possibility of compromise over land. But if it's because of the way we are, who we are, what we are, in our essence, it can't be. Now, this person here who spoke and made this speech, he's a Palestinian religious figure. He had a program on official PA-TV every week. I won't play it. He speaks slowly, but I'll tell you what he said. He said, humanity will never live in comfort as long as Jews are causing devastation and corruption throughout the world. An old man told me if a fish in the sea fights another fish, I'm sure the Jews are behind it. In other words, every problem in the world is because of the Jews. It's the same idea of the Satan idea. Satan brings all the evil to the world, And here he's saying, the Jews are bringing all the evil to the world, even if a fish fights a fish under the sea. Now, this person who said this first as an ideology, look what happened to him just the year after he said this. He had a meeting with Mahmoud Abbas, head of the Palestinian Authority, who then appointed him to be the dean of an entire school system. So here we're seeing again, the message is the ideology, but this person with this really anti-Semitic and hateful ideology, and we heard it in all of his broadcasting, he is then appointed to pass on this message to the next generation by being the head of this entire school system. Now, one of the things you have to understand is that I'm not telling you here about Hamas. I'm telling you here about the Palestinian Authority and Fatah, the mainstream. Everybody expects this from Hamas, but they don't realize that this is from the PA. I want to show you an item here, which is so shocking. Fatah has an educational division, and the educational division also produces documentaries. So last year, they produced a documentary on the Jews, and they put it on their Facebook page, the official Fatah Facebook page. Look at the way Palestinians are teaching their people and their youth on Facebook about Jews.
هناك في أوروبا يقيم القوم مخيماتهم وأماكن سكناهم. جيتوهات ضيقة تبنى أعمدتها على الانفكاك عن البشر غرورا واشمئزازا من أغيار أناس هم أفاعن أبناء أفاعن حسب رؤيتهم. هناك تحاك كل مؤامرات الاستغلال ويكره سكان الأرض جيتوهات القوم ومخازن تصدير الحقد والاستغلال ليتحولوا إلى مكون معادى.
Okay, and then this goes on and on and on. It's about 15 minutes of pure hatred like this. The messages here are unbelievable because it's actually turning the world upside down. The Jews were in ghettos because the non-Jewish world didn't want to have them around. They herded them in ghettos. And here he says the Jews chose to be in ghettos because in ghettos we could be alone, and there we would plan to do all these terrible things for humanity. And some of the quotes in there that come up later in this documentary, the Jewish tribe led the project to enslave humanity. The Jews allied with the Nazis to burn Jews, to accumulate wealth. The Jews say only we are people, all others are animals. The Jews were hated because of their racism and filthy behavior. This is so important. Anti-Semitism came about because of our behavior. We brought anti-Semitism on ourselves. That's what's being said here by the Palestinian Authority to their people. We brought anti-Semitism on ourselves because of the way we are, because of our behavior. So these are the messages coming through. Now, this message of the terrible behavior of Jews, I want to show you something, and you're the first people to ever see this. This was November 21st, 2020. This was on television yesterday. This is a children's program, and I want to show you what this moderator is telling the young children on the program.
وبعض الأصدقاء للأسف، وهذا الإشي كتير مؤسف اللي بدي أحكي لكم إياه، بيفقدوا حقهم بالحياة لأنه الاحتلال بيتعمد قتل الطفل الفلسطيني، وهذا إشي كتير موجع ومؤلم جدا. Okay.
Israel is intentionally targeting children. This isn't the first time she said it. She said it also a few years ago on this same children's program. She told children, 15 and 16-year-olds, not to go out alone because Israel is targeting children. This is the kind of hatred. So again, you have children. So you have at the adult level, they're creating an ideology. And children, they just say very simply, the Israelis are trying to kill you. It's a painful thing, but this is what Israelis are like. So message number 3, Jews are evil, killing adults and children. These are messages coming to Palestinian children. Now, the next thing that happens is this evil of the Jews, they apply to the world, and they reinterpret events of the world to put all the blame for things that Jews have nothing to do with, but they blame the Jews or Israel for these events. So, for example, during the terrible civil wars that were happening in the Arab world a few years ago, this is what Fatah put on their Facebook page, on their website a number of times in the year. They put a picture of Shiites and Sunnis who are blowing each other up. And as we know, hundreds of thousands of Shia and Sunni were killed in these civil wars. But who is actually behind it? It's the Jew. And look at this disgusting, evil picture of the Jew, the Israeli. They're the ones who are actually behind it. Then we had this one a few days after one of the ISIS terror attacks in Paris. 129 people were killed. ISIS was pulling the trigger, but Netanyahu was really directing the fire. This is the message coming to the Palestinians. And here we have it from the top himself. This is Mahmoud Abbas speaking on Palestinian television, and he told his people that The Jews in Europe were subjected to massacres every 10 to 15 years, right until the Holocaust, from the 11th century till the Holocaust, nonstop massacres. And then he says, okay, but why did this happen? The hatred of Jews is not due to their religion, but due to their social role. The Jewish problem is due to their social role, connected to usury, banks, and so forth. In other words, the same message coming from the top of the PA. The Jews are responsible for anti-Semitism. People hated us because of usury, because of what we did with the banks, and so forth, other things. It's not because they are anti-Semitic innately, it's because they have to defend themselves from our behavior. This is coming from the top. So we're seeing these messages from the top to the bottom in the Palestinian Authority now. And this is where we get to the worst part of this ideology. Since Jews are this terrible force for the world, Jews are planning to enslave all of humanity, Jews are connected to Satan, then it becomes just not only justified to kill Jews, but it actually becomes a service to humanity. This is the way evil is whitewashed by the Palestinian Authority. If you kill a Jew, you're actually doing something to protect humanity. And I'm going to show you this in their own words, like everything else. This is on official PA TV, a religious figure. He talked about the Jews who haven't changed through history. Allah made them into apes and pigs. We've heard that before just now. They're always corrupting and always plotting against humanity, not just against Muslims, but against all humanity. Then he goes as follows. These malignant genes and cursed characteristics continue in them from generation to generation. They inherit it from father to son. This is so important. Jews can't be fixed, he's saying. Jews can't be fixed. They pass it on from father to son. And then he goes, humanity will never be able to live together with them. And this is the same sentence we heard before from the other religious figure. If humanity can't live with us, then humanity must get rid of us. And this is exactly what he says. He talks about the end of time when Jews will hide behind stones and trees. The stone in the tree will say, Muslim servant of Allah, there's a Jew behind me, come and kill him. And then he prays for this end of time. Allah, count them and kill them one by one. Do not leave even one. A prayer on official Palestinian TV for the extermination of Jews in order to benefit humanity, for the good of humanity. This is the tragic message that's coming from the PA leaders to the people, because if Palestinians can be convinced that Jews are this evil force in the world and that killing them is what Allah wants of you, and not only is it what Allah wants of you, but it actually benefits all of mankind, then even good Palestinians are going to support terror. This is key. This is how you turn good people into terrorists and into supporters of terror, by convincing them that killing Jews, killing the objects of the terror, is actually a service to humanity. And that's what we're seeing here in this and all of these messages coming from the Palestinian Authority to their people. Now, just this year, that same Mahmoud al-Habash, who I mentioned before, who's the most important religious figure, he went on TV and he talked about the need again to kill Jews. And listen to the way he worded it on official Palestinian TV.
إذن اقتلوهم عائدة على المعتدين ولا تعتدوا إن الله لا يحب المعتدين واقتلوهم. المعتدين اقتلوهم، لأنه لو أجا واحد يعتدي علي، يعتدي على بيتي، يعتدي على أرضي، يعتدي على وطني، يعتدي على مالي، يعتدي على عرضي، يعتدي.
Okay, and he goes on now, he lists 10 things. First of all, notice he mentions 3 times kill them. Kill them, Allah doesn't like them, kill them, yes, kill them. 3 times he says kill them in case anyone has any doubts what he's talking about. And then he says if somebody comes to attack your home, your land or your homeland, your property, your honor, these are all things the Palestinian Authority accuses Israel of doing. They accuse the Jews of doing this. And he's coming and saying that Allah wants you to kill them. And he ends his speech by quoting again from the Quran. And he says, quote, kill them wherever you find them. Kill them wherever you find them. If you happen upon a Jew and you have the opportunity, or an Israeli, because they're stealing your land, your homeland, your existence, your rights, you are commanded to fight them and even kill them. So this is coming from the most important religious figure, very, very close person to Mahmoud Abbas. Like I said, he's appointed him to be his personal advisor for the last number of years. Now, that's at the adult level. How do you teach children to kill? And here we have where music comes in. And I want to show you, first of all, something that was said last year by an expert from Oxford University on extremism, talking about music videos. This was published last year in the Wall Street Journal. And Elizabeth Kendall from Oxford, she said the following: the rhyme, beat, evocative lyrics, and punchy delivery are especially appealing to youth. The catchy sing-along methods for propagating ISIS ideology means that it spreads quickly and sticks to the collective memory. It tends to be far more effective than sermons or theological debates and treatises. Okay, so what we're seeing here is that music is used very effectively to turn people into extremists, and ISIS used it. And now you're going to see the Palestinian Authority use this music as well. This is a broadcast that was numerous times on Palestinian TV, on official Palestinian TV this year. This was the message. Okay, strap on the belt, put on the explosive belts, detonate it in Haifa and Natlit. Don't let the enemy sleep. This is on official Palestinian Authority television, telling people that they should be going and blowing themselves up and killing Israelis. And it's put to music. It's not a religious figure. It's being done to music. Here we have another example. This has been running from 2017 through 2020. This is continuing this year. It's been 4 years on Palestinian TV. Okay, here what we're talking about, it's bringing it to a different level. Not only, excuse me, not only is it okay to go and kill Israelis in suicide bombings, but we're begging Allah, we promise us, we beg of you to allow us to be martyrs. That's the message coming through here. It's so wonderful to be a martyr for you, Allah. Grant us martyrdom there. And I tell you, like I said, this has been running for 4 years now on official Palestinian television. Now, that's at the adult level. And once again, we're going to go even to the children's level. First of all, the message to parents is not to be concerned about sending their children to die. This is a PATV filler. It was first broadcast earlier this year and then continued to be broadcast as a filler between programs. Listen to the first words of this message. Al-Aqsa is more precious than my children and more precious than my family. It continues, Al-Aqsa is my life. We will redeem you, etc., etc. This is a message, again, running this year on Palestinian television. Take a look at this one. Okay, mother of the martyr, congratulations to you on your martyrdom death. Now, these are so important because the messages here are that parents should not feel hesitant to let their children go out and die killing Israelis because we're congratulating you on their martyrdom death. This is something you should be proud about. So we're seeing here the encouragement to send children to the parents. Parents are encouraged to send their children to go off and die. And then the children themselves are being taught these messages at an age when they're so young, they don't even know what they're saying. Look at some of these examples from children's programs.
أنا الشبل الفلسطيني دم الشهداء يجري في شراييني دقت طبول الحرب أحصد الأرواح.
Okay, the souls of the blood of the martyrs flows in my vein. This is a program for 5, 6, 7-year-olds on Palestinian TV. Now here's one that was one of the worst examples that we've ever seen. Take a listen to this. It's girls reciting a poem about a boy who was promised a present from his mother if he finished his dinner properly. And that's where we're picking up this video.
فأمه أمه وعدته بهدية إن هو أنهى طعامه. تساءل بجنون ألعبة تكون. أقبلت أمه بطلة بهية تحمل الهدية. نظر إليها فإذا بها بندقية. صاح بأعلى صوته يا أمي يا أمي ما هذه؟ أهذه هي الهدية؟ ضمته إليها واحتضنته بيديها وقالت يا بني لم نخلق للسعادة، فأنت في نظري مشروع للشهادة. فالقدس لنا وسلاحنا إسلامنا وذخيرتنا أبناء.
Okay, here is the worst message probably a parent could ever give their child, and that's what's coming across in this story. And by the way, this video was put by Fatah on its Facebook page. My son, you weren't created for happiness, you're meant for martyrdom. You are merely ammunition. Our weapon is Islam, and you and our children, our children are the ammunition. Telling a child that they have no inherent value in themselves. It doesn't matter if they have a good life. It doesn't matter if they marry, have children, have a profession, have any feeling of happiness. No, you weren't made for happiness. You are only ammunition. I don't think there could be a worse message that parents could be giving to their children. And this is coming. This Fatah thought was an important message. And they took this video of this girl, which had originally been on a radio program, that had been videoed. They took it and they put it on their Facebook page. Message to their children, you are only ammunition. Like I say, why is this lecture entitled Child Abuse? There can probably be no greater abuse of a child than to say you have no value in and of yourself. You are merely ammunition for our cause for Islam. I'll give you one more example of this. And this was on earlier this year. And again, Fatah put this on their Facebook page. And again, it's quite shocking. This is what they thought was important for children to see.
سميه على أبوي قل له تاني أمير وتاني أمير.
خوفتني يما، وين هالمشوار؟
أستاذ
بعيد يما يا أمير.
لا يما والله جبل. انت روحي لو هي.
عمير رايح؟
الشهيد أمام ليلى صعبة. أعطوني هاد طور عمل عمل فوز على راسه. لا أنا عمل أنا عمل أنا ولادي.
بتخوك اليهود يما يا أمير وبتموت.
هذه يما روح في الكف. هي الكف أستاذ متشنع أنا أستاذ متشنع.
Okay, does Jerusalem deserve that I die for it? And Al-Aqsa deserve that we die for it? And then it goes on and on, this horrific video. Like I said, Fatah thought this was important. They put this on their Facebook page. All this encouraging young children, teenagers, everyone to see death for Allah. Now, final example here is, I'm giving you all the encouragement before the fact, how the Palestinian Authority encourages children to be martyrs and the adults. I'm going to show you is what happened in 2016. 2016 was the last very bad terror wave that we had. Excuse me. It started actually in November of 2015 and went through July just about of 2016. 54 Israelis and tourists who were visiting Israel were murdered by Palestinian terrorists. They called it the Night Intifada. It was mostly by knives and car rammings and a number of shootings. It was a terrible period, and many teenagers were involved. And you're not surprised. We see all the encouragement of teenagers to be involved in terror, and many teenagers actually did go. And then 16 12th graders were terrorists who died in their terror attacks. And at the end of the year in July, when the end of the school year, when it was matriculation day, this is the official announcement by WAFA. This is the official news agency of the Palestinian Authority. They had a message for all the students who are graduating, and this was part of the message. The day of the publication of high school matriculations exam is a day of long expectations. The families of the martyrs and their relatives, in other words, the 16 children who didn't survive, who died in 12th grade, that's who he's talking to. The families of the martyrs and their relatives find themselves proud of the martyrdom that their children achieved with their creator. 16 students succeeded. For death as a martyr is the path to excellence and greatness, and the path of those who know how to reach the great victory. So this is incredible. You have everybody is graduating high school except for these 16 students who went on terror attacks and were killed. And instead of mourning them, they're telling all the students that they succeeded. The 16 students succeeded. Death as a martyr is the path to excellence and greatness. You only got your matriculation, but they became martyrs. And that's the path to reach the great victory. It's again turning the world upside down. It's horrific child abuse, telling someone who worked hard and graduated that that was nothing compared to those 16 terrorists who died as martyrs. And this is a message coming from the official Palestinian Authority news agency. So the fourth message to Palestinian children, again, it's same as to adults: you are ammunition for Islam. Kill Israelis and Jews and die the heroic death as a martyr. Now, I actually have some more slides I want to show you and some more ideas that I want to show you, but I think what I'll do is I'll pause here now just in case there are people who have questions. And if you have questions, then I will take your questions now. This is the totality we're seeing of the Palestinian messages. I have some more things, but let me hear your questions first, and then if there's time at the end, I'll bring you to the end.
Well, firstly, let me just say, Itamar, if you've just joined us since we started at 6 p.m. this evening, we are talking to Itamar Marcus. He is the director of the Palestinian Media Watch, which monitors Palestinian Authority incitement and some of the videos that you've seen this evening. A number of comments have come in, some of them messages to each other. A couple of things that I would just like to kick off and ask with, and that is that you've been doing this for many years. I'm familiar with a lot of this material that you've shown this evening. I think many of our viewers are not. You've also traveled to many parliaments around the world, including the House of Commons, with a specific goal and focus. What was achieved out of those meetings?
Yes, I've traveled to many parliaments. I've been in the House of Commons numerous times. I've been in the House of Lords as well. And I've met with many government officials. The message constantly was that if you're funding the Palestinian Authority, you are responsible for everything I've just shown you. You cannot say, we're funding them because we want to help their society and not look at what they're doing with your money. Anyone who's funding the Palestinian Authority is literally guaranteeing that we are going to have a conflict into the next generation. There are going to be more children who are going to want to be martyrs. There are going to be more children who are going to want to kill Israelis, who believe that they're doing what God wants by killing Israelis. And our message to all these countries was, you can't fund the Palestinian Authority without first conditioning it on a changing of the school books and a changing of all their messages that come throughout society. Now, what's happened tragically is that most of the countries, and now Britain a number of times, right after I spoke to members of parliament, there were a number of times that money was frozen. There were hearings, there were debates, there were discussions. And eventually what was done is that the British government, the EU as well, decided that they wouldn't give money to the Palestinian Authority general budget anymore, but they would give money to what they thought would be helpful things like education, paying the salaries of teachers, building schools. And in theory, this is a good idea, but essentially what it means is that they're freeing up money. For the Palestinian Authority, it made no difference if they needed to have a $10 billion budget and you were giving them $5 billion for education and they still had $5 billion left for this. It didn't matter to them. They were still able to continue. No one ever conditioned it really on a full change. I'd say Britain didn't and the EU didn't. A number of countries have, by the way, and I would just point them out, that the Netherlands, Canada, the United States, and Australia all cut off funding completely to the Palestinian Authority in response to Palestinian Media Watch presentations, sometimes literally within weeks after I made presentations to them. Others, it took a longer period, but it was directly related to our findings. And that's very, very good. A lot of other countries cut down the funding. Unfortunately, it hasn't been enough pressure because, as you see, these messages are continuing literally right until today.
So just to be clear, the United Kingdom has cut down, or it hasn't, or it's still funding?
What it did is it doesn't give any money to the general budget of the Palestinian Authority anymore. And what it does is it funds projects, specific projects that it feels are going to be okay. It also funds Palestinian Authority education. Now, just remember, by Palestinian education, they are funding those schools where the kids are learning that Dalal Mughrabi is a hero and everybody wants to be like her. Dalal Mughrabi, who was a mass murderer of children and adults. So that's what Britain is funding. The only way this will ever stop is if countries like Britain say not a penny until you have clean school books, not a penny until you clean up your children's programs on TV, not a penny until Mahmoud Abbas apologizes for telling his people that Jews are responsible for anti-Semitism and all the massacres Jews brought on themselves. Only when there's this fundamental change will we have a real peace process going. We want a peace process. We can't have this fake peace process.
Right. So you mentioned the successes that you've had with Canada, United States, and the Netherlands. Have you had any positive feedback from the EU itself, which generally is known to fund a lot of this?
Absolutely. I've spoken numerous times in Parliament there, and it's caused debates. And there was, just a few months ago, I did a Zoom lecture to members of European Parliament where I showed literally how money was going from the EU to the Palestinian Authority to the PLO to terror organizations. And I know this has been brought up now, and there are members of European Parliament working on this. A member of Swedish Parliament actually brought this up when the Palestinian Authority Prime Minister was speaking at a Zoom lecture to them a few weeks ago. He said, "We know that you're giving money to terror organizations." Of course, he lied and he denied it. The Palestinian Authority Prime Minister denied it. But the fact is that it is creating rumbles and noise in the European Union as well. And we're hoping that eventually this will sink into these people. You can't fund this and turn the other way and claim you're not responsible.
Let's go to some of the questions that are coming through right now. John asks that he doesn't, of course, doubt this is exactly how you presented it, but how much is this being done freely and how much is being done under duress, would you say?
The Palestinian Authority, because we see the same messages coming from the leadership of the Palestinian Authority. And that's one of the things I was trying to impress upon you. You've got the message coming from Mahmoud Abbas. You've got the message coming from his personal advisors. You've got the message coming from the educators who he has appointed. And then we see the same messages coming on children's programs. It's absolutely what the messages that the Palestinian Authority wants its people to get. Same thing, we see the same messages in the school books. You could not have the uniform message if it was accidental or coincidental. These are definitely the messages that the Palestinian Authority leadership wants for its people and wants for its children.
I'm just going through a number of these questions over here. Some of them are repeated questions from other people. Sam is asking, what is Israel doing about this?
Okay, Israel, we supply all this information to the Israeli government as well. One of the things that we worked very hard with the Israeli government was to cut off funding. Israel doesn't fund the PA, but Israel transfers tax money to the PA, and Israel actually, because of our work, cut off about 150 million shekels a year in funding that it was giving to the PA of the tax money, because that was the money that the Palestinian Authority was directly giving to terrorists in prison. They literally took our figure, we published the figure, and then a few weeks later they announced that would cut that money off. So the Israeli government is listening as well. Israel doesn't have the kind of influence that the foreign countries do. Israel doesn't fund the PA. We just transfer them tax money. The ones who are giving them the probably more than a third of their budget, probably 40% of their budget today comes from donor countries, most of them Western countries. So that means that those countries have an incredible opportunity to demand change and to demand that all of this be eliminated. Tragically, I say Israel can't do much. It's the Europeans, it's Britain, it's others who are allowing this to continue.
So a continuation of that question is that what would happen if, and by the way, let me just say to our viewers this evening that I've seen you several times on Israeli television. What was Channel 2, now Channel 12. You've often spoken about this on the evening news, on primetime news, and of course Israeli officials, government MKs have seen this and acted upon this. But what would happen if Israel would themselves shut down some of these radio and television networks which are broadcasting this stuff? And to reiterate, primetime children's television in the afternoon directed at very young children.
So first of all, the problem is way beyond the radio and the television, because, for example, when you see the names of the schools, when you see sporting events, when you see all the activities, when you see music videos and songs that children are singing in school, when you see all of this, you realize that the TV is just a minor part of the problem. The TV is not the whole problem. The TV is a minor, the TV is our window to see that this problem exists throughout Palestinian society. That's the first thing. Second thing is, if Israel were to cut off Palestinian television, the entire world would be condemning Israel, even though we have the proof of what they're using television for. And I'll just give you an example. During the Palestinian terror war, which they called the Intifada, there had been some broadcasts that PMW had exposed, calling for suicide bombings. And then when there was another suicide bombing, Israel actually blew up and destroyed the Palestinian television station in Ramallah in response, because they had called for the murder of Israelis and suicide bombings. And the entire world condemned Israel. Instead of saying, they said, how can you expect the Palestinians to have a society and freedom of expression and freedom of communication if you destroy their communications network? So that was outrageous that Israel was condemned, but that's the situation. You have to realize that Israel is never being judged honestly and fairly in the world today for a number of years now. And that is one of those examples. So Israel cannot destroy or cut down Palestinian TV because the world will just complain to us.
Sure. And if I may add a question from myself, if it was to withdraw some of the funding that it gives, i.e. the tax receipts, which up until recently, as I understand, the Palestinian Authority was refusing it because of its association with the UAE and Bahrain. But now they are taking that money. If Israel was to stop that on the basis of this propaganda, these videos, this incitement, this hatred, what do you think would be the international reaction towards Israel?
I don't think that would be helpful for Israel to do, to cut off all the tax money, for the simple reason that we don't want the Palestinian Authority to fall apart. We want them to be fixed. We want them to change themselves. We don't want them to tell their people that Israel's cutting off the money and therefore go out and you'll have more terrorism because of it. The ones who can cut off the money are the Europeans and the foreign countries, but because they're giving of their own money. Israel is collecting tax money that we collected. It is really Palestinian money. So I think it's best that we transfer the money over, even though they're using it for these terrible things. And we have to encourage the foreign countries who have the real leverage, who are giving not just financial support, but they're also giving political support. Look what happened in the United Nations just last week, where you had all the European countries and Britain as well, all condemning Israel numerous times for things that are completely legal that Israel is doing. And I'm not going to get into the legalities now, but it was just outrageous votings. Well, when the Palestinians see that they have all of those countries, I think there were only 6 countries who voted against on Israel's side. Well, when the Palestinians see that, they say, you know what, we can continue telling our kids to be martyrs. We can continue telling our people that Jews have to be destroyed because they're Satan's ally, because the world just doesn't care what we say and what we teach. The world is on our side. They probably hate the Jews as much as we do.
Here's an interesting one. As I'm scrolling down, and a lot of these are comments from viewers this evening who are seeing this for the first time. Utterly disgusted they are, very surprised, never knew this is taking place. So you've certainly highlighted this evening. As you know, UK universities and college campuses, as the same in the United States, are not great places these days for Jewish people, and certainly the Jewish people who go there. They try and keep a low profile when they can with regard to Israel and their connection to Israel. How do you get this type of material that you've shown this evening onto the campuses so perhaps some others who loathe Israel and any person who sticks up for Israel to try and perhaps change their mind? Or is that really going too far?
No, it's not going too far at all, and it's a great question. And except for this year, where everything's been closed down, in every single year I travel primarily to the United States, and I speak on numerous campuses. I also speak to to student groups, and I supplied them with this full presentation. I'll point this out right now, that at the end, I'll give you an email address. Anyone who wants this entire presentation can write to me, and I will send you an entire presentation, all the slides, all the videos that you can then pass on to any students who want to show this on campus. I've also shown this in universities in Britain, and I must point out that the response is usually excellent. Certainly the people who are not ideologically committed anti-Israel fanatics find this shocking. I've had Muslims shocked at seeing this material. I was speaking once at a university in New York, and one of the Muslims got up and said, "I'm president of the Muslim Society, and I want you to give me a copy of this presentation. And we as Muslims at this university, we're going to send this to the Palestinian Authority and to Mahmoud Abbas in the name of the Muslim Society here to demand that they don't do this to Palestinian children." So
who was he? Where was he based? Just once again?
That was in New York. That was in the University of New York. Now, I also had, I remember a Palestinian, not a Palestinian, a Jordanian who heard me speak in a university it was in Boston University. And he said, in one of his questions, he said, I'm a student here. I'm wondering, he wanted to know if he could spend a summer working with PMW and for PMW. And he was Jordanian. He said, this is terrible. This is outrageous. This doesn't happen. So one of the things actually that we are doing now in Israel is that we are now organizing work together with many of those Muslims who I've met around the world, as well as Palestinians who are sick of this hate messaging to their children. And we're working with Palestinians and trying to create a framework for them. One of their problems is fear of the Palestinian Authority, so everything has to be done quietly. They can't openly recruit extra people to work with them. But eventually, I think we're going to have a very large number of Palestinians who are going to be working with us to promote a more peaceful Palestinian world. The first one already has met with me, together with when a delegation of members of parliament from the Netherlands was in Israel in December, this past December. Palestinian met with me, and I made my presentation, and then the Palestinian spoke, and the combination was very powerful. He said, yes, he's young, he was 26 years old at the time. He said, I was brought up on this same hate material. It ruined my life, and fortunately I met an Israeli, and it took a while till I realized it, but then I realized that my whole life had been a lie. Because of the PA, and you must save us from our leaders. These leaders are destroying us. This was a Palestinian speaking, very articulate, very intelligent, good English speaker. And he and other Palestinians who we're working with now will be traveling, as soon as we're able to travel, we'll be traveling to parliaments around the world together, not just by myself now, but with the Palestinians who can say, yes, this is the terrible world that we're exposed to, and you're the ones who are funding it, and you have to create a better world for us. And it's not going to be with this PA leadership.
Right. So I was just about to say that in some cases, the Palestinians are also a victim of this, but yet those, let's say them for, I don't want to get into politics, but more left-wing liberal campus people in the United States and in the UK completely are oblivious to this. And they're actually going against the very people, the Palestinians, who they claim to be standing up for, because they're completely oblivious of the facts on the ground. Is that fair to say?
That's absolutely correct. That's absolutely correct. And anyone who cares about Palestinians would want to work with PMW, because no one who cares about Palestinians should want Palestinian children to be brought up with the message that they are only ammunition. It's as simple as that. No one should want them to grow up thinking that Israelis are targeting Palestinian children, and therefore they will always hate Israelis because they feel we want to kill them. So these are such terrible messages for children. No child should be brought up with this kind of abuse. And it's coming, like I said, from the leadership of the PA to the people in every framework that we can follow. And And good people around the world, members of parliament, Muslim members of parliament who've spoken to me from some countries, are all horrified by this. And we just have to reach that tipping point where we end up getting more people around the world aware of this and ultimately realize that this is not an Israeli organization, Palestinian Media Watch, that is against Palestinians, but just the opposite. We want to have peace with Palestinians, and the only way that will happen is if we eliminate the hatred that the Palestinian children are being poisoned with.
6 minutes after 7 o'clock in the UK, 6 minutes after 9 o'clock in Israel, where Itamar Marcus is speaking with us right now. We mentioned earlier on that you've had the opportunity to visit many, many parliaments all over the world. Congress, Scandinavian parliaments, Canada, here in the House of Commons. So this shocking material has been given over and shown to some members of parliament in those respective countries. Karen is asking, has this also been made available to some of the well-known newsprint and TV media? And if so, what's their response? And by the way, to that, Jonathan saw the question and he said, The Guardian thinks that the Palestinian Media Watch is a Hasbara plot.
Yeah. There are different messages, and newspapers like The Guardian, they have their ideology and they're not going to be interested in meeting. But I have met with newspapers that are not necessarily pro-Israel or that have been anti-Israel. And when I sit with them and give them a full presentation, I've met with editorial boards, for example, during their daily meeting and made a presentation to them. And they're blown away. They had no idea. A lot of them get turned around. A lot of journalists have been turned around because they had been going on the standard line, Israel's an occupier, Palestinians are victims, Palestinians just want a little bit of land and there'll be peace. And they had no idea that the fundamental messages of the PA from the leadership on down were these hate messages that have nothing to do with land. By the way, I just want to show you one thing that I was saving for the end, but let me jump ahead to this because I'm saying it doesn't have to do with land. One of the biggest Palestinian Authority lies is that they tell the leadership in UK and around the world is that they only want West Bank, Gaza Strip, and Jerusalem. Let me show you what they tell their people. I'll just give you a couple of quick examples. First of all, this is a map. This is October 28th, just a few weeks ago. Fatah put this on their Facebook page. They put all of these maps, and the text was, "Here we remain, we will not leave. Palestine is the goal that dignifies and the flag that waves." This is Palestine. This is a message from Mahmoud al-Abash again, that same leading religious leader. And he says, it was Palestine and it is Palestine and it will be called Palestine until of the promise of Allah arrives. This is Palestine. And again, it includes all of Israel. This is a Palestinian school book. These are the components of the state of Palestine. This is a geographic area of the state of Palestine. This was a program on official PA TV last year. A teacher in a school was having an exhibit that she produced. I just want to show you the exhibit. So the exhibit has little Israeli flags over the whole country from the top of Israel here, Haifa, here you see Haifa, and here you see different parts, Tel Aviv area, Jaffa over here. And you've got a Palestinian flag on top. Now look at the Israeli flags. They're all torn in half. Every Israeli flag is torn in half, meaning this is the end of Israeli jurisdiction over the entire country, and it's replaced by a Palestinian flag. And this is what the teacher said: "This is our vision. We hope to liberate soon, a map that we hope to achieve soon." And I want to thank the school principal with us for the good efforts to educate our male and female students. The children are literally taught that they are going to liberate all of Palestine. Like I said, this is a Palestinian school system. I'll show you one more item. And because this is also so new, November 3rd, just this month, you're also the first people to see this. The Palestinians claim they want West Bank. Look what he's talking about. Lod is right near. It's about a few kilometers away from Tel Aviv. Listen to what this boy said on TV.
مدينة اللد من أقدم مدن فلسطين، تقع على بعد 38 كيلومتر شمال غرب القدس وعلى مسافة 16 كيلومتر جنوب شرق يافا. عبد الرحمن بابا طفل عمره 12 سنة من مدينة اللد وعايش بمخيم الأمعري مؤقت لأنه راجع للد اللب بيسكنوا وبيسكنوا الحنين وبيرتقي بالآتي.
اليهود سلبوا أرضنا منا، وأنا صار لي 12 سنة بنظر، وأبوي صار له 40 سنة، سيدي له 70 سنة بنظر، لأنه اليهود اغتصبوا أرضنا وأخذونا وسكنونا في المخيمات. بتمنى أرجع على البلد مدينتي.
بتحس إنه بكرة رح نرجع؟
بحس حالي بكرة راجع ونحرر فلسطين. بتخيل كل يوم كل دقيقة.
Okay, Palestinian children being brought up to imagine and believe that they are going to go back. He was never in-law, of course, but that's what they're saying. The Jews stole it. The Jews took it. I dreamed that I'm going to go back. This is the message. So even the message about land, which I didn't even focus on, even the message on land that they tell the newspapers and tell the media and tell the members of parliament and tell the British government, it is a false message because the kids are brought up that they are going to liberate all of Palestine. Some newspapers, like I say, do turn around if they're honest and they're open-minded. Some newspapers won't even let us in the front door, probably because they're afraid of the information that they're going to see. And I would think The Guardian is in that category.
Can you name some of the other newspapers that might be in that category?
Well, one of the good newspapers is the Wall Street Journal. I've met with their people and they've done some very good stories. New York Post is likewise a very good newspaper that's willing to cover.
What about the New York Times?
The New York Times, they have done a number of our stories. When we wrote a book about the Palestinian Authority, which we called Deception, Betraying the Peace Process, I wrote it together with a colleague of mine, Nanjak Zilberdick from PMW. The New York Times gave us a full entire article about that, which is rare. Not every book that's published gets a full article. And it was a fair analysis. It pointed out some of the terrible things that the Palestinians did. But as a rule, the New York Times, we know, is very, very slanted against Israel. But if you come with the information and with the story, very often they feel the obligation as journalists to actually publish that particular story. And we just have to do more of that.
Yes. And just to reiterate, these are not just clips and videos that you're showing us from 15 years ago and 10 years ago. In fact, one of the clips, if you have just joined in the last 10 or 15 minutes, was from November the 21st of this year, which is just literally in the last few hours.
Exactly.
Such.
And this one is earlier this month, yes.
And also as well, you mentioned the name Fatah. Just to be clear, so Mahmoud Abbas Abu Mazen is head of Fatah, and I have seen myself many times on the Fatah Facebook page, From the River to the Sea, Palestine, and I think most people know the rest of the words there as well, not really encouraging peace. One of my colleagues, I don't know if you've answered this one yet, because there's a number of comments that have come through, so we're not going to be able to get through all of them, but one of my colleagues is asking, what does Israel do with this info once you pass it on to them?
There was a period of about 4 years where we actually met every 3 months in the Prime Minister's office, and we would supply them with this material. And the representative in the Prime Minister's office at the end would take all of the material that we gave him on the videos, and he would literally travel and put all the material on his laptop, and he would go country to country, and he would present this material. Another person told me about a meeting with a prime minister from Europe, from a European country, in Netanyahu's office. And when he talked about Palestinian incitement and he said, I don't know what that is, the person who was with him literally took his cell phone and showed him that day's bulletin, which was an example of this. The other thing we know is that, for example, when Netanyahu met with President Trump and with others as well, he actually has a full video of our material of children's issues. What happened was, if you remember, Mahmoud Abbas had spoken at a press conference with President Trump, and he said, we bring up our children on a culture of peace. So we saw that, and we immediately produced a video of a 7-minute video of a fraction of the hate material that children are being brought up on in the Palestinian Authority. And we supplied that to the Prime Minister's office. And we were told, it was actually on the radio in Israel, that material was shown by Prime Minister Netanyahu to Donald Trump, who then publicly criticized the Palestinian Authority. So we know that at the leadership level, the material is being used regularly. Prime Minister Netanyahu, when he spoke in the UN in recent years, he actually cited a whole series of examples from PMW. He started it saying, I want to describe for you a typical day in the life of a Palestinian child. And then he gave 10 examples, all of them examples of things that Palestinian Media Watch had supplied his office. So we not only go directly ourselves to governments, we also give it to the Israeli government to use it. And by the way, I might add that there have been numerous times that members of British Parliament have quoted PMW in their debates in Parliament, sometimes even by name. Joan Ryan from the Labour Party, head of Labour Friends of Israel for a number of years. There's a video where she said, just look at what Palestinian Media Watch has shown. They're using our money to pay salaries to terrorists. So we don't only supply, we actually give the ammunition to MPs around the world to fight to defend Israel from the lies that many of the opposition, the people who oppose Israel, are spreading in many places around the world.
There are a number of people commenting on the great work that you're doing and to keep it up, and they are horrified of what they're seeing. Some people, as I said earlier, for the very first time, some people for the very first time, they are horrified at this. Karen was asking, and there's a message that's just come through to her with regard to a book that you published several years ago. In fact, you gave me a copy several years ago, entitled Deception. Is that still current and available?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. You just go onto our website and you can purchase it. Definitely.
Okay. I had a question. I'm going to end up with my question related to the current Arabs who are very friendly with Israel, at least we believe. Bahrain, the UAE, Oman, and even many within Saudi, although there's not an official agreement as such at this point. Are they aware of this type of Palestinian incitement? And do they say this is one of the reasons why we've bypassed the Palestinians today and we are dealing directly with Israel, because now we're looking out for our own interest and the interest of our people, and we can't wait for the Palestinians to finally get round the table and talk about real peace, and not just peace, and then at the same time incitement to their people?
I'm not sure if they were aware initially, but as soon as the UAE signed its treaty, its first announcement with Israel, and the Palestinian Authority started to condemn them, we immediately produced a report, which was then, I'll just show you some of the examples here. The Palestinian Authority, the same kind of incitement that they've always had against Israel, they started inciting against the United Arab Emirates, and then against Bahrain and also Sudan. So here the Mohammed bin Zayed, he's in the trash can of history. They're stabbing Palestinians in the back. Here this is the Arab League that's being buried. This is all here. Signing with Israel is like signing with death. This is all PA hatred against their own Arab countries. We made a full report, which we sent, and we know it was delivered to the American ambassador to Saudi Arabia, the Saudi Arabian ambassador to the United States, who then passed it on to other people, and it's hopefully going around. I'm also trying to get people who we're in contact with to actually have a possible meeting with me with some of the leadership in these countries, in the Gulf states, and literally give them the same full presentation that you have seen, and make them realize what the Palestinian Authority is, so that if they have, probably they've heard about the problems, but there's nothing like seeing these children's programs, and hopefully when they will see these, their concern or their strength in realizing how that the right thing to do is to make peace with Israel and not to wait for the Palestinians. I think that would be strengthened by letting them see this material. And it's one of the things that we're hoping to do as soon as travel is open.
Last couple of questions from Claire. Is there any difference between Palestinian Authority schools and UNRWA schools based in Gaza?
There's no difference. And the reason is, when we did our first report on Palestinian school books, which also were the same books that are being used by UNRWA, the United Nations, actually it was American Congress, I presented it to American congressmen. They asked UNRWA to review our report and to explain why they're using these books. So UNRWA reviewed our report. They didn't find even one thing that was translated incorrectly. They accepted the whole report. And they said, though, we have to use these books because every Palestinian child takes the same matriculation exam, and we don't want the children who are studying in the UNRWA schools to be at a disadvantage to the Palestinians who study in non-UNRWA schools. So UNRWA used that as an excuse. So literally, this is the same education that UNRWA is giving, likewise with everybody's money.
I'm just wondering if this question from Diane is showing that perhaps she was originally from Switzerland, because she's asking, have you met with the Swiss parliamentarians? And if so, what was their reaction?
I've spoken a number of times to Swiss parliamentarians. I have meetings.
Sure.
I've met with government officials. I met with a number of years ago with the man in the foreign ministry who was responsible specifically for the Middle East in the Swiss government. And I'll never forget when I was meeting with the representative who was, like I say, he had a position in charge of the diplomat for the peace process between Israel and the Palestinians. And he looked up and I talked then about Hamas, and he said, I think they've been lying to me. That's what he said. That was his conclusion, that the Palestinians were lying to him. So like I said, because what's special and what's important about Palestinian Media Watch work, I don't come in and say, I feel the Palestinians are this. I let the Palestinians speak for themselves. I let them speak for themselves by showing the material in the school books, showing the messages from Mahmoud Abbas, from Mahmoud al-Abbas, from all the people he appoints. And when people see that these are the messages coming from the top to the bottom, from the leadership and then down to the children, they recognize that this is the situation. And they end up with statements like, I think they were lying to me.
If somebody wishes to contact you, you gave an email earlier on. I believe you gave the email. If not, I'll give you an opportunity to give it now. And I just wanted to also mention your website, which is very simple, www.palwatch.org. That's palwatch.org. If you go to that website, I believe that you can actually sign up and get regular weekly or fortnightly digests of the current things being monitored right now.
Yeah, now if you look on the screen right now, I hope everybody can see this on the screen. The address here is pmw@palwatch.org. You could write to me at this address. You could also write to this address and ask for a copy of this presentation, and I will send the entire presentation to you. So please, before we turn the screen off, write this down, pmw@palwatch.org. You can also go, as James said, go into the website itself, palwatch.org, and you can see all the material. You can click on the tag for children, and you can see years of children's videos, years of children's material, and you can make any combination of tags that you want to see.
And please, if I can also reiterate to the viewers as well, that this is some material that really needs to get out. Of course, Itamar has done an amazing job, not just him, but he has a large team now working with him in Jerusalem. And I've met one or two of them, although it was several years ago. And there's still not enough people that are aware of this. And I think it's important to say, this is not, of course, as I got a message earlier on this afternoon about this, this is not anti-Palestinian whatsoever. It's got nothing to do with that. On the contrary, this is pro-Palestinian, because if you're pro-Palestinian, that means that you want to sit down with the Palestinians, you want some type of a deal, you want to make real peace, not just a piece of paper, but real peace, which will stop this incitement, stop the terrorism, and stop the brainwashing of the next generation and the generation after that and the generation after that. This is what it's all about. Because if you don't get rid of this, there will not be any peace. So that's why it's so important to spread this information around, to pass it around with the objective of coming to some type of a peace accord and a peace treaty with the Palestinians. And I think if I can just end by saying, it doesn't look very positive at this point, simply because Mahmoud Abbas Abu Mazen is 85 years old, I believe. He hasn't been well for many years. He hasn't prepared a successor. There's going to be an internal battle within the PLO, Palestinian Authority, when he finally moves on. Are there any thoughts that you might have on what may take place in the coming years?
So unfortunately, like you're saying, he not only hasn't he appointed a successor, there are a number of people who we know want to be his successor. There's Mahmoud Al-Alul, who's his deputy in Fatah. There's Jibril Rajoub, who's head of the Sports Authority. There are a number of other, Tafik Tarawi, who used to be head of the security services. All of these people, all the people who are in the running are people who've expressed similar hate messages, some of them even worse hate messages than I even showed you today. All three of those people who I just mentioned to you right now have all expressed support for fighting, for killing, and other things as well. So that's the dangerous thing. Worse yet, the young people who are growing up today in the Palestinian Authority are growing up with blinders to anything good that Israel has done over the years before the Palestinian Authority was created. They were brought up in a Palestinian Authority closed environment. All the education was poison. All of the TV was poison. And the terrorism which forced Israel to build the wall, the fence as a defense against suicide bombers, also cut down the contact between Israelis and Palestinians. So that what you have is a Palestinian youth who are far more extreme than even the Palestinian adults. In fact, in the last few days when they've talked about the Palestinian Authority renewing contacts with Israel, it was a lot of the Palestinian youth and the activists who in Fatah and others who are most outraged about this. So that's what's so scary about this, is when you poison the youth, you're not just poisoning today, you're poisoning tomorrow as well. And that's why we're so concerned.
Excuse me, I'm just going to ask one final question, and I don't know if you just mentioned the name, Mohammed Dakhlan. Was that one of the names you just mentioned? It wasn't.
No, it wasn't.
So,
the name. Yeah.
So we hear quite a lot about Dakhlan, who was completely opposed to Abu Mazen Mahmoud Abbas. What is his views on peace with Israel, if he was to take over?
Right. So Dakhlan, you have to just recognize, was a terrorist like all the other terrorists. His fighting with Mahmoud Abbas had nothing to do with desire for peace with Israel. It was all personal issues. It was all personal infighting. In the last few days, in the last few weeks, actually, he's actually been more active on Facebook, and just hateful messages coming from Dakhlan as well. Some people are claiming that Dakhlan, because he's in the UAE, United Arab Emirates, he will, and they think he may have been involved in the deal that was arranged there. They think he might be more moderate. It's possible. We don't know for sure, because he really has not spoken up a lot in the last number of years. He's been in exile from the Palestinian Authority. Because of that, he's really not a potential partner here. He's not a potential leader. The Palestinians don't see him, and in the public opinion polls, when they ask who would you want to be a Palestinian prime minister, he either doesn't appear or he's down in the in the single digits, very, very low. He's not and because he's been away, he's not a serious figure. So anyone who thinks that Dakhlan is going to come out of nowhere and bring peace, one, they don't know his real opinions, and two, he has no support from the people. It's not going to happen.
Okay, I asked because some of the networks in Israel have been mentioning his name over the last couple of weeks as well. Wow, some amazing insights and analysis, coupled with clips and videos and translations. You've been listening to Itamar Marcus. He's the Palestinian Media Watch director. Some fascinating information has come through this evening. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and always a pleasure to work with ZF.
Yeah, it's a great pleasure to speak with you again, and to see you again after several years. Just a couple of things coming up over the next couple of weeks. We have, and you can join, by the way, via Zoom, free, because all of these regular talks are free. The Abraham Accords, as I mentioned at the beginning, they've brought about a great change in the Middle East, with, of course, the recent peace treaties and trade treaties between Israel and the UAE. And to hear many insights into what is taking place between Israel and the Emirates in particular, we're joined by an Emirates entrepreneur. His name is Omar Al-Basadi. which is we're going to hear from him on Sunday, the 6th of December. That starts at 6 p.m. GMT, 6 p.m. in Britain, Sunday, the 6th of December, 2 weeks' time, that is. The following week after that, Hanukkah, Sunday, the 13th of December, the Zionist Federation hosting a Hanukkah celebration with the World Zionist Organization. More information on that will be available this week. Please look out for the Zionist Federation published details. Then on Wednesday, the 16th of December at 8 p.m. GMT, you have to note there are different times. So you have to check in with us. Sometimes they start at 6 p.m. in the UK. Sometimes they start at 8 p.m. in the UK. But this is starting at 8 p.m. on Wednesday, the 16th of December. The ZF will be hearing about Jewish life in the Emirates, the synagogues, kosher food, etc., from the chief rabbi of the UAE. He's a young man. He's got a lot to say. And by the way, they're also now making kosher weddings in the UAE and Bahrain. So if you're thinking about getting married and you're looking for a venue, you might want to consider Bahrain and the UAE, coupled with a chuppah, a rabbi, lots of kosher food, and a great atmosphere. That's it. Thank you so much again for tuning in. We've gone a little bit over time, 90 minutes, but I think you'll agree it was well worth it. Also, thank you very much to the CEO of the Zionist Federation. That's Steve Winston, who was doing all the controls. And alongside him, but in a different place, because of course it has to be government guidelines and regulations according to Corona and COVID-19. Dalia Hajioff, thank you very much for what you've been doing here this evening as well. And we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you and have a nice evening.
Thanks, James. Thank you, Itamar, and thank you everyone for joining us. Thanks a lot. Good night.
Thank you for inviting me. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.